Swift reaction from all party leaders after the release of photos of Liberal leader Justin Trudeau in brownface and in blackface. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is Canada's first visible minority leader of a federal party, and he joins us this morning in our downtown studio where people at home can hear a little bit of construction outside, but we are going to plow right through. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for being here. You've had the night to sleep on this. How do you feel this morning?
You know, I really thought about this a lot, and when I came out yesterday with my second response, I really wanted to talk to Canadians, because as I reflected on it and thinking more about what this means, this is a really hurtful thing for a lot of Canadians who are going to think about all the incidents in their lives when they were insulted or mocked or hurt physically because of racism in a country where people felt maybe a little safe, that this is a place where multiculturalism is celebrated. Now seeing the Prime Minister do this makes a lot of people question his sincerity, but really question their place. And I really want people to know, despite how hard it is, given those images, I want people to love themselves, to feel like they're appreciated and valued and they have worth for who they are.
You said last night, as well as highlighting that sting of racism that's been felt by many people who are non-white, you also said last night was not about the Prime Minister. There are calls for the Prime Minister to step down. How are you feeling this morning? This morning it is about the Prime Minister. Well,
I still really want to talk about the people that are impacted by it. I'm absolutely certain this speaks about, and this raises questions about the sincerity of the Prime Minister when he goes to events and says that multiculturalism is important and diversity is important. Now people question the sincerity of that, and that's very fair for people to do that.
Do you still think he's qualified as a leader?
I think people will answer that question.
And you think that?
I think that there's a pattern of behavior. And for me, if this was one isolated incident, it would be one thing. But we see very recently, just as early as this year, where behind closed doors at a private fundraiser, people came and said they were worried about the mercury poisoning of an Indigenous community, Grassy Narrows, where people are suffering from mercury poisoning. Instead of responding to those folks who were saying that we need help, he mocked them, made fun of them, and was applauded and cheered on by those attending this fundraiser. That to me shows an utter lack of compassion for humans that are going through mercury poisoning. And that to me really builds out a story where this is not an isolated incident. It's a pattern of behavior that Mr. Trudeau is very different behind closed doors than what he shows to people in public.
Mr. Singh, you said that you want to talk to those who felt the sting of racism. What about the other side of the equation? Those who have not, those who say that this is not a big deal. What do you say to those people?
Well, there's a lot of pain that goes through people who have suffered racism. And Canada is a place that a lot of people are proud of. We really celebrate the fact that people from all over the world come to Canada and call it home. When a Prime Minister mocks people for their lived experiences, it's going to bring back a lot of memories for people. I got a text from a friend who shared a really personal account of the racism he faced growing up, and it shattered me to hear how hard it was for him. And I remember having to fight back against racism, and I had martial arts classes, so I fought back. But there's a lot of people that couldn't fight back. There's a lot of people that still can't fight back and that are hurting. And it means a lot to them to see the Prime Minister, who on one side used to say that people are welcome, and now saying that effectively that they're to be mocked or they're to be made fun of. It hurts. It hurts people, and people are going to be struggling today because of it.
You talked about people who are fighting back against racism. I want to move our discussion on to Bill 21. You've said you don't support Quebec's Bill 21. You also contest it's because it's a provincial jurisdiction. You won't get involved federally. But what do you say to a teacher or to a police officer who wears a turban like yourself, who can't fight back? They need a job.
It's wrong. I mean, it's wrong. And what it does, this bill, it divides people. It says that where some people are being discriminated in society or being made fun of for what they look like, now there's a law that says not only is it okay, but it is now in law that people should be discriminated because of the way they look. It is so wrong. It is the wrong direction for our country. I'm hoping that by going to Quebec and by campaigning to become Prime Minister, I can show people, listen, you can love your identity as Quebecers and love the language, but the way to celebrate it isn't to say that people should be discriminated. It's to say, let's welcome people and share the beauty of the language.
But making a speech doesn't help somebody get a job.
Exactly. The issue isn't, they're not being told they can't wear their turbans or express themselves. Personally, they're saying that you can't do that and have the job that you want in your chosen profession.
In fact, it's telling people that discrimination is legal. It's legal to discriminate someone based on the way they look.
Then why not make it a federal issue?
I'm trying to fight back. I'm going to Quebec, and I'm trying to win over people. The difference is what I've realized in life is to win over people, I'm doing it as an act. I'm there living the realities of it. I'm showing people that you can build a better world. I grew up as a kid in Windsor that fell in love with French and now speaks the language. And if we want to share the language and build on building a better world, you can't do it by discriminating people and saying that they can't work a certain job. You build a better world by bringing people together.
But I've got to push back a little more, because you've gone on record saying you wouldn't prop up an Andrew Scheer minority government because he and his party can't be trusted to uphold fundamental human rights. How is that any different from the NDP's position of not taking an active stance against a bill that they believe does not uphold fundamental human rights?
Oh, I'm taking an active stance. I'm campaigning in Quebec and saying it's wrong. I'm not shying away from saying it's wrong. There's a court challenge right now, and I support that right to challenge it in court. And that's an important thing to happen. And that's going to continue down its path. I'm going to do my part to go to Quebec and say that it's wrong and try to win people over and say, listen, this is not the way for us to move forward. I'm living that reality, and I'm going to Quebec and sharing that.
All right, well, we're going to carry on this conversation after the break.
But I first want to bring in Lindsey. Lindsey, you had a question from social media?
I do, yes. I have a Facebook question from Joyce Bickerdike in Nova Scotia. So Joyce asked this: where would you distribute the affordable housing, and would the Maritimes be included?
Absolutely. Our plan to tackle affordable housing is a Canada-wide plan. We know that housing is one of the most difficult things that people are faced with right now. So many Canadians cannot find a place to call home. People can't live in the communities they grew up in, and we want to change that. There's been about 30 years of neglect and lack of investments at the federal level. We want to boldly and ambitiously invest in building new affordable homes, 500,000 across Canada, and that means in Atlantic Canada, the Maritimes, Prairies, East Coast, West Coast, all across this beautiful country.
Do you have a formula that you're going to be sharing with Canadians as to how to decide where that affordable housing is going to be allocated?
Yeah, we'll have more to say on our details of the plan, but the values are going to be where there's need, where there's populations, where there's communities that are hurting because there's no housing. There's a scarcity question across Canada in rural communities and in urban centers. There's an affordability question as well as a quality question. We want to solve all those problems.
All right, well, I jumped the gun a little bit earlier, but now is the time to take a short break. Thank you very much. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is staying with us to answer more of your questions right after this. We are back with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, let's get back to affordable housing and how to pay for it. Your plan plans to eliminate the sales tax to incentivize developers to build these types of homes. But according to the Globe and Mail, that's the same tax exemption that the Liberals proposed in 2015. They walked that back in 2017, saying they couldn't make the math work. So how are you looking at it differently? Why is this the right plan for 2019?
We know that we've got to make some tough decisions. And we've got to make tough decisions if we want to tackle the housing crisis. It is a crisis. And what it's turned out is that Mr. Trudeau has called it a housing crisis and has criticized previous governments. But the reality is the PBO came out with a report saying that he's spending less on housing than even Mr. Harper did, 19% less based on GDP. That's wrong. What we need to do is make bold investments, and that means having the courage to say we've got to encourage private development of affordable housing, but most importantly, we have to put our public dollars towards building new affordable housing. That's why a lot of communities that have affordable housing, it came from federal investments. For 30 years, that's been neglected. And that's why there's a massive shortage in affordable options for people. People can't find a place to rent, let alone a place to buy. We need to make sure that that changes.
I want to talk about another platform that you announced yesterday. This is your dental care free for households that are earning less than $70,000 a year. And just as a reminder to voters, you're also promising to eliminate interest on student loans, eventually make tuition free, universal farm care, increasing childcare spending by $1 billion annually, and creating 500,000, as you mentioned, affordable housing units in the next 10 years. All of these things sound fantastic, but how will you pay for them?
Well, it's really about choices. I mean, when conservative governments and liberal governments talk about tax cuts, no one talks about how much that costs. That's a cost because it takes away from our revenue. We're saying we'll do things differently. In the past year alone, Mr. Trudeau put in place a $14 billion tax cut, basically gave $14 billion to the richest corporations to buy corporate jets and limousines. He bought a pipeline for $4.5. That was in the fall economic statement. And then right after, he bought a pipeline for $4.5 billion. That's almost $20 billion that was spent on the wealthiest Canadians, on the wealthiest corporations. I wouldn't do that. I would put our precious resources towards investing in Canadians. On top of that, we would close offshore tax havens, which the PBO says is $23 billion of lost revenue. We'd put in place a super wealth tax on those who've got fortunes of over 20 million. We're going to ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. For too long in Ottawa, governments have helped out making the very richest have their lives easier, and that's hurt Canadians and made their lives harder.
It's a hard sell to try and convince people to give away more of their money.
Well, we're
For
asking the
something that
wealthiest.
doesn't necessarily benefit them.
We're asking the wealthiest to do so, and we think it's only fair. And Canadians believe it's the right thing to do. We've seen recent polls that said most Canadians, the vast majority, believe that the ultra wealthy should be paying more, and we're going to make that happen.
And in doing your math, are you factoring in the possibility that if the tax rates get to a certain level, tax avoidance and people, individuals and corporations up and moving outside of Canadian jurisdiction to avoid paying those taxes that they view as onerous?
Well, we've looked at that, and it's absolutely something we can cover. Offshore tax havens are really just a tax avoidance scheme, and they can be really controlled. There's no reason why a Canadian company should be sending money offshores to a shell company. There's no employees there just to avoid paying taxes. That's something we need. It's irresponsible not to tackle, and Canadians expect us to do so. We will, and we will use that to invest in people. People are struggling with housing. They're struggling with the cost of medication and dental care. That's something we're really proud of. We will put in place a plan within the first 100 days. It's affordable. It costs $856 million, where on one side we've seen Mr. Trudeau spend $20 billion on wealthy corporations to spend $856 million on Canadians so they can have the dental care they need. To me, it's something I get excited by. It's the better choice, and it's a choice that's going to help out Canadians.
But you wouldn't be one of those wealthy Canadians paying for that plan.
I'd be probably
unless you have some money I don't know about.
Yeah, no, I'd be a part of we'd have a corporate tax, or we'd have a personal income tax that would impact people like me for sure. Everyone should pay their fair share, and I believe in that, and I'm supporting that absolutely. But we know that it doesn't make sense that a corporation has all these loopholes where they can send money offshore, where CEOs don't pay any money on their stock options. That alone, that loophole where CEOs, just under 100 CEOs, make so much money that putting in that stock option loophole, canceling it, could raise as much as $1 billion in revenue. So there's massive things we can do.
Just one last question on this file. This requires a massive influx, investment, as it were, in public funds. And you have said that you have a reasonable plan to get Canada back in the black. Is there any timeline associated with that? And are you fearful that the entire system could collapse were we to fall into a serious recession?
Well, not at all, because our focus is investing in people, creating jobs that is going to spur the economy. What the past record has been is just giving away money to the billionaires, and we've seen what that's done. I grew up in Windsor, where I saw companies get billions of dollars, and then instead of staying in Canada, they closed shop and left. Same in London. We saw Caterpillar, successful company that received billions of dollars in money, federal money, and then they just closed shop and left. That happens again and again. We don't believe in giving billions of dollars away to the wealthiest corporations just so they can increase their profit. We've got to make sure we make investments in people that help workers out, that help Canadian families out. That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
Third place is shaping up, basically, if polls are to be believed, third place is shaping up to be a fight between the NDP and the Greens. And at first blush, there is a lot of overlap between your two parties' platforms. A lot of the differences are differences in nuance, both in favor of a carbon tax. Greens want universal childcare. NDP wants to invest $1 billion. Both want to expand health care into universal pharmacare, including dental, housing. 500,000 new housing units by the NDP. The Greens want 25,000, renovating 15,000 more. Both parties want to increase the minimum wage to $15. As progressives are looking for a place to park their vote, how do you tell them to distinguish between one or the other?
Well, my target is Mr. Trudeau. I'm running to form government. I want to be prime minister of this country. And I know that it's possible because people need us. They need us to put in place not just changes and bold action to tackle climate crisis, but also bold action to tackle the social justice and injustice people face. So people believe us when it comes to expanding healthcare. We know that Tommy Douglas started a vision and a dream of expanding to have Medicare for all. We want to go beyond that to include medication coverage and now to dental care. We know that's something very vital. And Canadians depend on us. They know they need someone that's going to fight for them. We're in it for people in a way that is very unique to who we are. And that's something that we can provide a solution that's not just one or the other, but where we tackle climate crisis, invest in creating jobs, never leaving workers behind. We've got a solid position on ensuring that women have the right to choose, a solid position on national unity, and as well a position on social justice, like the healthcare and the housing that people need.
Mr. Singh, I'm looking for a number here in terms of seat count. What does success look like for your party in this election?
It means forming government. It means forming the next new democratic government where people know that we're not going to have a government that works for the people at the very top, those who are already well connected and powerful, but a government that works for people.
But Mr. Singh, that's a lofty goal. It never happened in the history of Canada. If you don't achieve that, if you fall short of that, does that mean your time as leader is up?
That means we keep on fighting hard, and that's what my goal is. I want to form government so we can lift people up. We can build a government that actually puts people as the priority at the heart of what we're doing, that ensures we make the right investments in people, that doesn't continue to benefit those who already have so much going for them. We have to help people out, working class families, folks that need the help.
All right, Mr. Singh, I want to thank you for joining us here for your morning, your vote. Good to have you here on the day after the photos have been released, so thanks for your time today. A reminder, we've invited all of the federal leaders to come here and to join us on your morning.